Good morning and welcome to another Tuesday tour. It's John Sautter along with Michael Fairchild behind the camera today. And today we're going to be featuring Owen Hall and focus a little bit on Richard Owen, our very first president. And so we're located right now outside of Owen Hall, H1. Some of you might recall it being called when it was first opened in 1957. Shortly after that, right across the street, H2 opened up. Tarkington Hall, H3, Wiley Hall, and on they went. We had 1 through 8 of H halls back in the 50s as we needed housing quickly. Walter Scholler designed these very efficient facilities, and so it was opened then in 1957. 1965, it was renamed for Richard Owen, our first president. It has 700 beds, originally opened for men only. But in 1980, it went co-ed, and so now the West Wing is for women, the East Wing is for men, and they don't serve food here anymore. That's next door in the dining court. So there's been a few changes. So we'll look around on the inside, and then we're going to be talking about Richard Owen. So I'll meet you on the inside. Okay, we've now moved to inside Owen Hall, and we're in the main lounge of Owen Hall, H1. Again, I'm assuming many of you must have lived here at one point or another. And as Michael pans the main lounge, this is the site of many of the dinner dances that took place. Some of you may recall those lovely evenings where we converted halls to supper clubs. And you really got a great meal and a great reception out here. Or maybe they had speakers in. Quite often all the freshmen started their freshman year right here with their green pots on, right in the main lounge. The dining rooms are now, again, not serving meals. They've been converted to offices and to rec rooms and lounges, that sort of thing, downstairs. Some of you may remember the Busby that was there. That was the grill. It's now become kind of a vending lounge and kind of a laundry room. The student organization there was called the Hussars. And that was a student organization that provided a lot of the activities, for the students living in the hall. And some of those students are fairly well known. Leroy Keys, give the ball to Leroy. He lived here when he was a student athlete. Roland Parrish, who was on the track team and benefactor of the parish library in Cranbrook, lived here as a student, as well as Morgan Burke and his son, Mike Berghoff, the current president of the Board of Trustees. He lived here. His daughter lived here also when we went co-ed. And then other well-known people are Jonathan Sautter and his son, Jack Sautter, our grandson. They lived here. So a lot of well-known, semi-well-known people have really gotten their start right here at Owen Hall. And so we now want to talk about Owen Hall a little bit. And to do that, we're now in front of this statue, which is actually a replica of a statue of one down at the state capitol. And so let me tell you how that got here. Richard Owen actually was born in Scotland in 1810. He was the youngest of 8. And they all moved and immigrated to the United States, and they ended up locating in southern Indiana. So if you go to southern Indiana, the New Albany area around there, a lot of Richard Owen influence in that particular area. Richard Owen became quite the scholar. In fact, he was very well known for geology and meteorology, seismology, all those things, very well known in those particular areas. Once the war arrived, he got involved and became a recognized soldier. He was a captain in the Spanish War. He was a colonel for Ulysses S. Grant in the Civil War, and really distinguished himself, but really became known as being the commander of the Confederate prisoner stockade in Indianapolis. It was called Camp Morton. And he ran that stockade in a very, very humane way. He really took care of the prisoners as well as he could and ran the stockade very efficiently, to the point that once he got out of that particular field and went back to IU as an instructor, the prisoners got together and made it possible to have a bust made that now stands in the state capitol building. So this is a replica of the Richard Owen bust that stands in the state capitol building. And so they were most appreciative of their treatment there. But around 1862 or so, he's now a professor at IU. Around 1869 now, Purdue is getting chartered, and we need a president. And so they end up finding Richard Owen. They offer the presidency to Richard Owen, but things don't go so well for Richard Owen. It just doesn't work out quite so well. In fact, he's only our president for about 19 months. In fact, March of 1874, 146 years ago this month, Richard Owen resigned. And so as I found out some things about Richard Owen by way of The Midas of the Wabash, a book by Bob Kriebel, there's a quote that I read and it jumped out at me, and it said that Richard Owen was out of step with the trustees and never any pet of John Purdue. And so things were going on there, but what better way to get to the bottom of all this than to talk to John Purdue himself? So we have invited John Purdue to visit today.
Good day, Mr. Saunders.
Good day, John.
Good to see you. I've learned your 21st century handshake.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for inviting me here today. I always enjoy coming out and speaking with you and getting around my campus and seeing all this beautiful, lovely artwork.
Well, it's great to have you here. Tell us about that decision to hire Richard Owen as the president of your university.
It was my university, and some people didn't understand that it was my university. It was not the state's, it was mine. We hired Richard Owen in kind of a hurry. Actually, the first person we hired as president of Purdue was a man named William Clark, who was president of the Massachusetts Agricultural College, now known as the University of Massachusetts Amherst. That was a land-grant college. He had been there when that university opened. He had hired the faculty, got the students enrolled, and built the buildings. He was exactly what we needed in 1872 to get Purdue up and running and going. We offered him the job, and he accepted. It was the New York Times had a story about that Clark had accepted our position and he's moving to Purdue. People in Massachusetts weren't as pleased with the land-grant college as they thought they would be. And Clark thought this was a good opportunity and a good time for him to leave. But the Board of Trustees went to him en masse and convinced him not to go. So we suddenly, in the summer of 1872, got a letter from Clark saying that he was sorry, he had accepted, but he was now going to decline the offer.
Right.
That was at a meeting in mid-August of 1872. At the same meeting where his letter was read, we ushered Richard Owen into the room, interviewed him briefly, and hired him. It was done very quickly.
On the spot.
On the spot. Just to give you an idea of how we felt about Richard Owen as compared to Mr. Clark, we offered Mr. Clark a salary of $5,000 a year, a free home, and a $1,000 signing bonus, almost like he was a football player. And we offered Mr. Owen $3,500 and travel expenses from IU to Purdue when he went back and forth. So we really felt more comfortable with Clark than with Mr. Owen, but we had to get a president hired very quickly. We did not get along, finally, I'll go ahead and ask more questions, and I'll give you that information.
Yeah, I understand that part of the rocky road was that the trustees, including yourself, had asked him for a draft of a plan as to how this whole university concept was going to work. In fact, it was called a scheme of education appropriate for the university, and he submitted that.
Right.
How was his scheme received?
He submitted that, and we asked him to do it in May of 1873. That was the first job he performed for us. He was hired in August of 1872. In May of 1873, we gave him his first job. First time back at campus since we hired him.
7 months later. Yeah.
He finished it by August, gave that presentation to us. It was 19 pages full of minutia surrounded by unimportant things. We wanted the plan for how he was going to bring students here, how he was going to hire faculty, what would the curriculum be, what about textbooks, all these problems we had to open a university and get it running. The report had nothing to do with that. The report was full of things like what make and model stove we should put in the kitchen. It was to have things like give every student a number and put those numbers on their personal items like their napkin rings, their place at the table, their clothing. It told us what kind of chemicals to use in our outhouses. And we probably should have put the report in the outhouse, but we kept it around and debated it. It was throughout the state. It was people did not like it. Abraham Shortridge, was superintendent of the schools in Indianapolis. He wrote in a column that Mr. Owen should resign, in spite of the fact that he was a very distinguished scientist. He was a hero during the Civil War. He was not a good president of Purdue University. And Shortridge said he should resign soon. I myself whispered in the ear of a reporter for the Lafayette Journal in January of 1874 that I was never in favor of hiring Owen in the first place. And of course, that reporter put it into his paper, just as I knew he would.
Uh-huh.
When Owen saw that, he knew he had no chance of surviving. And so at the beginning of March of that year, 1874, he resigned.
My goodness. Now, I understand within that report, a lot of minutia, a lot of detail, to the point that even one of the dietary restrictions that he recommended was to eliminate the free use of pork in the dining halls. That had not sit with you very well.
I was known as the king of pork in New York City, where I spent the entire Civil War supplying pork to the Union Army. I was a big pork producer here in the state of Indiana. That is not a smart thing to say to the founding donor of this university and a member of the board of trustees. Mm-hmm. But we had already not agreed, and that's why we gave him no assignments really until we gave him the one assignment, and he didn't do well at that. Mm-hmm. By the way, interestingly enough, the governor kind of forced Abraham Shortridge on us as our second president, the one who asked Mr. Owen to resign. And in short order, I got rid of Mr. Shortridge as well. We did not get along at all. They brought in Emerson White, and we did not get along at all. And I would have gotten rid of him had I not died first. And then they gave him permission to deliver my eulogy at my graveside. And he went on to tell people that I had what today you would term as dementia. Dementia.
Wow.
I wish I'd written my own eulogy. It would have been a lot better than his.
Well, you can tell the beginnings of Purdue were challenging, to say the least. Higher education was trying to get a foothold. And you can see the dynamics taking place with the trustees, plus with your university,
yes,
trying to get it going.
The trustees really didn't know how to start a university, had no idea. They weren't university people. They were businessmen and they were lawyers, mm-hmm. and didn't know what to do. And so they would travel around to other universities and get ideas. Yeah. But it did get off to a rocky start.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Richard Owen was our first president, for whom Owen Hall is named. This is a replica, and John, I understand there's more than one replica of this statue.
Yes, there is replica at IU as well. And Mr. Owen is the only person who has a statue and a building named in his honor at both the Indiana University campus and the Purdue University campus.
Wow.
Even I didn't get that honor.
There is a distinction. Okay.
He was a very distinguished professor at IU and a very well-respected man from a brilliant family. His father started a utopian community in southern Indiana that was very big on education. At the same time, formal education. At the same time, Abraham Lincoln was growing up not 100 miles away with hardly any formal education at all. His brother was elected to Congress. He was a state representative. He was a great advocate for women's rights. He wanted women to be able to own property, mm-hmm. and he thought women should have the right to vote. That didn't come about in his lifetime,
no.
But I understand it did come about later.
Okay. Well, that's quite something, as we're talking the 1850s, 60s, and 70s now along the way. So, well, you heard it firsthand from John Purdue himself. That's a little background on Richard Owen. And, of course, John Purdue is John Norberg. Available, JB Norberg at purdue.edu. If you're interested in having John and John come to maybe one of your classrooms or your get-togethers or a Purdue party or something like that, he'd be more than happy to do that. He'd be a great guest to have there. So on behalf of John and Michael and John Sautter from the Purdue Alumni Association, hail Purdue.